When you think of Alexander the Great, what comes to mind? Probably epic battles, a massive empire, the whole military genius thing, right? But today, we're going to look past the battlefield. We're asking a different question. What happened after the fighting stopped? We're exploring Alexander the ruler. Because let's be honest, conquering is one thing, but actually governing a gigantic, sprawling, multicultural empire, that is a completely different ballgame. This was Alexander's ultimate test. Could he actually pull it off? So first up, let's talk about the conqueror's dilemma. To really get a handle on what Alexander was up against, you have to appreciate the sheer scale of the problem he'd created for himself. It was mind-boggling. I mean, just look at this. An empire stretching over 2 million square miles. You've got Greeks, Egyptians, Persians, Babylonians, dozens of different peoples, all with their own languages, gods, and traditions. You can't hold that together just with an army. No. You need a totally different kind of genius for that. So what was his first move? Well, you might be surprised. It was actually incredibly pragmatic. He didn't try to reinvent the wheel. He just looked at the system that was already there. See, the Persians had been running this massive territory for centuries, using a system of provinces or satrapies. Each one was led by a governor, a satrap, who handled all the local stuff. Taxes, justice, you name it. It was a system that worked, and more importantly, one the locals already understood. And Alexander's decision here was, frankly, brilliant. Why tear down a perfectly good system? He basically just took it over. He kept the structure, the provinces, the whole deal. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And this quote from the historian Arrian just shows how far he was willing to take this. After he conquers Babylon, one of the most important cities in the world, who does he put in charge? A Macedonian general? Nope. He appoints Mazaeus, a Persian nobleman who literally fought against him in battle. Talk about a power move. It sent a clear message. This wasn't just about Macedonians ruling everyone else. But, this hands-off approach had a pretty major downside. While Alexander was busy campaigning way out east in India, his long absence started to create a serious power vacuum back home. With the king thousands of miles away, a lot of these governors, both his own Macedonians and the Persians he'd appointed, got a little too comfortable. They started acting like kings in their own right, probably thinking, he's never coming back. And we're not talking about petty corruption here. According to Arrian, the charges were serious. These guys were plundering temples, desecrating tombs, and brutalizing the local population. They were threatening the very stability of the empire he'd fought so hard to build. So when Alexander finally did return, his response was swift, and it was absolutely brutal. He knew any sign of weakness would be fatal. He had to remind everyone, very forcefully, who was in charge. This quote from Arrian is so interesting because it shows a real shift in Alexander. The experience seems to have hardened him, made him more suspicious, less willing to forgive. He made a very public and terrifying example of the corrupt governors to send a crystal-clear message, you do not cross me. But his justice could be a little strange. Take the case of Cleomenes, the governor of Egypt. Arrian tells us this guy was famously corrupt, but in a letter, Alexander basically offers him a deal. Build a massive, magnificent shrine for my best friend, Hephaestion, who had just died, and I'll pardon all your crimes, past and future. It's this wild moment that shows for Alexander, personal feelings could sometimes trump public justice. Okay, so punishing bad governors was a short-term fix, but Alexander was thinking bigger. This brings us to his ultimate solution, his grand vision for how to actually hold this empire together for the long haul. And this was his most radical idea by far. He called it fusion. He didn't want Macedonians just ruling over Persians forever. He wanted to create a totally new, blended culture, a unified ruling class that was loyal to him and him alone. At the heart of that vision is this number, 30,000. Arrian tells us Alexander took 30,000 young Persian boys, taught them Greek, and trained them in Macedonian military tactics. He called them the Epigoni, the inheritors. A whole new generation of soldiers whose loyalty wasn't to Persia or Macedon, but directly to Alexander. And he went all in on this. He held a mass wedding at Susa where he made his top 80 officers marry Persian noblewomen. And then he started adopting Persian royal dress and court customs himself. Now, you can imagine how this went over with his tough, old-school Macedonian soldiers. They were not happy. They saw it as a betrayal. So his own men might have hated the idea, but Alexander was pushing forward. And maybe the best evidence we have for this incredible vision isn't in any ancient book. It's actually carved into a block of marble. This is the so-called Alexander sarcophagus. Ironically, it wasn't actually Alexander's coffin. It was likely made for a local king that Alexander himself put on the throne, and the story it tells is just extraordinary. And here's the kicker. The sarcophagus tells two different stories. On one side, you have the past, Macedonians and Persians in the heat of battle, locked in brutal combat. It's all about conquest. But then you go around to the other side, and you see the future he wanted. Macedonians and Persians hunting a lion together, side by side, as equals. It's basically a perfect summary of his entire administrative policy, right there in stone. It shows the journey from violent conflicts to a new world of shared power, from pure conquest to fusion. So the big question is, could it have worked? Was this a truly brilliant vision of a new kind of multicultural world? Or was it just a practical plan that was kind of papering over all these deep resentments that were bound to explode sooner or later? And the thing is, we'll just never know for sure. Alexander died suddenly of a fever when he was only 32, leaving this grand experiment totally unfinished. His empire shattered almost immediately. But that vision of fusion, it didn't completely die. It laid the groundwork for the Hellenistic Age, where Greek and Eastern cultures blended for centuries. And so his greatest challenge remains one of history's great unanswered questions. Could his new world have actually outlived him?